Welcome to our second of 10 webinars in our 2025 Women in Leadership Executive Speaker Series, with this one titled The Unspoken Truths for Women's Career Success. I'm Dr. Susan Madsen, founding director of the Utah Women in Leadership Project, and also the Karen Haight Huntsman Endowed Professor of Leadership in the John M. Huntsman School of Business at Utah State University. And I'm the host, and we'll be interviewing Tessa today. So this event furthers the mission of the Utah Women in Leadership Project, which is to strengthen the impact of Utah girls and women. And we serve Utah and its residents first by producing relevant, trustworthy, and applicable research. Second, creating and gathering valuable resources. And third, convening trainings and events that inform, inspire, and ignite growth and change for all Utahns. And I'd like to thank our two sponsors, John M. Huntsman School of Business and also Utah State University Extension. So Tessa, I'm going to jump right in and introduce you first, and then we'll start our interview, our conversation. So Tessa White is founder of The Job Doctor, a practice dedicated to building career strategies and re-engaging people in the workplace. She is a former Fortune 50 executive and a 25-year HR executive, helping companies with fast growth and aggressive merger acquisition strategies. Her career began with Stephen R. Covey, acclaimed leadership expert. She has used his principles throughout her career to create award-winning people strategies. She was recently named in the Disruptor magazine, I love the name of that magazine, as one of the top female entrepreneurs to watch in 2021 and in USA Today, and one of the top speakers to watch in 2022. Her thought leadership on the modern workforce makes her a frequent guest on national television shows and in top-tier publications. So she has amassed more than 1 million followers on social media, and she's ranked in the top 2% of creators on her live career sessions on TikTok. So you're a TikTok user, Tessa. That's
I am.
I hear to be for at least certain parts of the population.
Well, yes and no. It's supposed to shut down this week. And I am in deep, deep mourning. I really didn't think it was possible it could happen. So I'm very sad.
Well, we'll see what really happens, right?
Yeah, we will. We'll wait and see.
Yes. I would love to have you start by giving us some background on your career path. I read that bio, but there's so much more. And so just give us a little bit more and how you got to do what you're doing right now. And I know you love it.
Yes, I love what I do now. I started out as an admin to in the CEO of Stephen Covey's company. That's what I started doing, and I thought that was like the job I'd always wanted, and I couldn't believe I had it. And I really didn't have sights on anything different than that until I ended up divorced with 3 kids, and I had no college degree to speak of. And I was just, how am I going to make a living? And it was really challenging. Luckily, I went into HR because I thought that it would be an easy job where I could plan a lot of parties. Ha ha. That's what I thought HR was. And the career
How old
has
were
been.
Your kids at the time?
Oh my gosh, I had little kids. When I got divorced, I think my oldest was 8 and my youngest was 4. And I thought, how am I going to make this house payment? And what am I going to do? I just thought I would get married and I thought I would have a husband take care of me. And I thought that's all that I would need.
Mm.
And then I found myself as the sole provider for 10 years for my family before I remarried. And I've always worked since then. I will never put myself in a position to not be able to take care of myself again. It was a really scary time.
So HR was not what you expected.
No, it was not what I expected. But, you know, if you fast forward 20 years, I can remember very clearly the day sitting in a Manhattan high rise building at Blackstone, leading the compensation committee for a discussion about stock options and how we were going to do this in our company. And I thought, oh my gosh, how did I get here? It was just a series of a lot of really good companies that I chose and just working my butt off. And I ended up being able to do some really cool things in my career. I got to ring the bell at the New York Stock Exchange. That was really fun. I was the only woman on the podium and in a sea of like 20 men. And then about 2019, I decided I was going to retire and go fly fish my brains out. And the
Fly
pandemic
fish?
hit. Yeah, I love to fly fish. I would fly fish 24 hours a day if I could. And I, was locked in the house like everybody. And I thought, I can't do this. I have to be busy. So I started the job doctor. And the first day I went live, I had business. And my daughter is the one that posted on TikTok because I didn't know how to log in. And my son called me from California a couple of days later and he goes, Mom, my girlfriend found you on her For You page on TikTok. Is that possible? And I'm like, oh, yeah, I totally forgot I posted. We went back and looked and I had 10,000 followers. And,
Wow.
it just like exploded. It was just the right time, the right place to be somebody who'd been around the block and to give people career advice because you didn't find a lot of career coaches back
Yeah.
then.
And
And I
you
rode
had
the
really,
wave.
oh, yeah, I love that. You had really kind of worked your way up from just being an admin to just a basic HR job. And then
Right.
where did you end up before you retired?
Well,
Where
I ended up,
you
I
did?
got my first head of HR job back in WordPerfect Corel days. People that
Oh,
are old enough know those names. And I only got the job because everybody quit. And there was nobody to run HR. All of HR quit because they were going to shut down Corel. And they said, Tessa, will you be the head of HR? And I'm like, sure. How hard can it be? And so I was tasked with shutting down the Utah and actually USA facilities for Corel. And that was my first job. And then I ended up after that just being the head of HR for companies that were fast growing. Ended up at United Health Group, which is a Fortune 50 company. And then the last place I was Vivint Solar, which a lot of people know about. And that was, the millennial slash Gen Z capital of the world. There was about 10 adults in the room, and everybody else was 24 years old. And it was such a shock to my system, but it was a really great opportunity. And that's, I think, why I can relate to a younger generation and speak to what they want because I was immersed in it at Vivint Solar.
wow. And so TikTok is where you really have your following and like a million?
I have 700 some odd thousand on TikTok and
Wow.
400 some odd thousand on Instagram and a bunch scattered on YouTube and some other platforms. But
Mhm.
that's primarily where I do my stuff.
Oh, and you're obviously having fun. I'm sure you enjoyed all the challenges and you had throughout, but it's kind of nice to have a change when you get older, isn't it?
You
You're
know what?
still
I
young.
think I reinvented myself at age 55 when all my friends were starting to just, play with their grandkids and make Sunday dinners. I'm like, "Hey, let's start a business. And what if we did this? And what if we did it this way?" And I'll tell you, it made me feel really alive because I really truly am an accidental influencer, but it has opened the door to a book deal with one of the biggest publishing companies in the nation. I get calls all week long from Wall Street Journal or CNN or NPR and
Wow.
get to go on all these programs to talk about the modern workplace. And it really has been the funnest thing I've ever done.
Oh, I love that. And so, as I said in the introduction for people that want to see the book, so this is Tessa's book, and 2023,
Yes, March
correct?
2, 2023, it came out.
So, the unspoken truths for career success. And so, I really wanted to have a conversation with you about. I read this a couple months ago and really appreciated it. Of course, I've been in this space of career development and everything.
Mm-hmm.
But I love the way you bring out here's the lies, here's the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Just, you're pretty. I love the stories and everything, but then you just say what needs to be said. And I'm kind of a direct person, not just kind of. I'm a direct
Yeah,
person.
you're a truth teller too.
Yeah, truth teller. That's a better way to put it. So what I would like to do is, and this is for men and women, but I know as you've spent your years read, I know you read and you read research and so forth, that you know some of the gender things as well. So
Mm-hmm.
anytime that's applicable, let's bring that in. So I
Sure.
really wanted to first ask you what motivated you to write this book, and then what your favorite concept was in the book.
Okay. Well, I wrote it because I thought about my own career journey. I just fought and scrabbled my way to the top, and I felt alone so much of the time. And the one lucky thing I had was in HR, you get to see both sides of the story, right? And you understand the conversations going on behind closed doors. So I had at least that advantage, but there was a point that came and I thought, you know what? I'm doing all of this stuff for the company to help the company, but you know who really needs help are the people in the company who don't understand the dynamics and how it works, because there are patterns. There are patterns of things that people do to that always blow up, and there's things that people do that always help careers. And I thought I need to tell people about it because I have this extremely unique vantage point and just all of these case studies in my head that I felt like would be so helpful. So I wrote the book that I would have wanted as a young professional.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
And what was your favorite? I have lots of good questions of people in about 10-15 minutes. I'll start pulling in questions from the audience as well. But what comes to mind when I say just share one of your favorite concepts?
I will tell you one that I think is especially applicable for women, as I've observed. And that is, nobody's good at having direct conversations. Just as generally speaking, people like to avoid conflict. And that's true at work too. And I hear a lot of people say the company's stupid, my manager's stupid, but I'm not stupid. I do it right, but they do it wrong. And there's one thing that shows up all the time, and that is halfway conversations. A halfway conversation is when you want to talk to your manager or somebody about a problem or a concern. And we think that if we tell them 25% of the truth or with 25% directness, somehow they're going to absorb 100% of our meaning. And it doesn't work. And if I go to companies, I sit in a room and I listen in a meeting, you hear it all day long. It happens when you're in a meeting and a manager says, "Is everybody on board for this idea?" And everybody's like, "Yeah, let's do it." And you hear people whisper as they walk out of the meeting, "It'll never work." I'm so glad that their name's on it and not mine. And so this idea of having halfway conversations for women, especially,
Yeah.
being brave enough to have the right conversation. And I think women in general want to, but they're often afraid of their career blowing up or saying it wrong. And so they either move to a place of just like go too hard, or they don't say anything. And silence is where they most often live and think that by being agreeable, they're going to get ahead, when in fact, just being agreeable at some point will be a fatal flaw in their career. So that's one of the concepts I love to talk about.
Well, it's one of the things I'm thinking about as I'm listening to you is that we as women are socialized to do what you talked about. That's
Yes.
what we're taught to do. That's what we see other women do, our
Mm-hmm.
mothers sometimes, or our school teachers in certain settings or whatever. So when we so I think it's bravery, like you said, but I also think it's relearning. It's relearning and creating new habits of being more direct.
Yes, it absolutely is. I see, and I have had to overcome my own
Yeah.
biases about you get ahead by smiling and being agreeable, then you'll get ahead, or do extra work. You'll pick up the slack and do more work than everybody else, and of course they'll see me and appreciate it. So I've made these mistakes in my own career, and what I try and teach women is you have to have a voice, and you can have a voice that's still strong without being labeled a bitch, which is also what happens out there.
Yeah, that is true, because sometimes you do that and then but it is exhausting sometimes as a woman.
It is exhausting.
You have to find your way of being direct, getting used to that, creating trust, and then figuring out how to say things in a way that helps you develop all of that.
It's hard because in meetings, for example, I was talked over a lot,
Mm,
and it was really hard, and I had to learn skill sets to be able to
Even at your upper levels?
even at the upper, especially at the upper levels. And I had to, raise my hand at times and say, stop, I have something to say when I was interrupted. That was really a hard skill set to develop and to be able to talk without, feeling like I was being mislabeled or mischaracterized by other people. And I also had to learn if I couldn't do it in the moment, I had to have these hard conversations privately with people a lot of times, and
Yeah.
they had to do it in a way that built up their relationship rather than hurt it. So it was tricky, of course.
Before I jump over to my next question, there's a related question in the chat Rhonda put in. Sometimes I'm told I'm too direct, too
Hmm.
candid. Should I tone it down or what do I do?
That's a great question. And that's why I'm saying that we often tend to go too far one direction to be heard or go silent, but we have a hard time often getting in that middle ground. Here's my advice. I'm going to teach you 3 questions that you can ask that the whole idea around conflict is you want to act like a partner, not an enemy, because the minute somebody feels backed against the wall, you're going to lose credibility or you'll lose the battle. And so if you act like a partner says it doesn't go on the opposite team. So is that what you intended? Do you see it the same way? Or is there something missing that would help me understand? Those 3 magic questions allow for the conversation to continue without blaming anybody else. And so, for somebody who's having a problem going too hard one way, if you botch even the front end of the conversation, but can go back to those really open ended questions, those will help you keep your conversation in a good place.
So what were those questions again? I
It
should have
is,
probably captured them in the
is
chat.
that what you intended? Do you see it differently? Or is there something missing? It feels like there's something missing that would help me understand.
I love that.
Yeah.
We'll capture those. We always send a follow-up email to everybody that RSVP'd. So we'll capture those because I think they're going to be really ones that all of us will want to use. So thank you so much for that. Um, so the title of your first chapter in your book is Something's Got to Give. Now, as a
Yeah.
woman, mother, employee, community volunteer, I feel this too often.
Yeah.
But tell us what you mean by that.
Um, and at its core, what I mean by that is there's a lot of roles that you're playing, a lot of roles that you're playing. And until you can create the right boundaries at work, you're going to have difficulty. I can remember very distinctly driving home from work one day, single mom, and realizing it was my son's birthday.
Oh, no.
And I had forgotten. And I just felt shame in that moment. And I called my son, and in a moment that I'm still embarrassed to talk about, I actually said, "Hey, do you want to have a party or do you want a $20 bill so you can buy anything you want?" And I knew it was a bribe in that moment. It was a desperation move from a single mom who couldn't balance everything. And I would get so frustrated that I couldn't balance everything. And yet I'd look at this other person. I call him Golden Boy in the book. He had time for family vacations. He was always, gone. He left on time, and I was left working late, and I was feeling really bitter about it. But the truth is, Susan, we can create boundaries. We don't think we can, and we think we'll get fired by creating boundaries. But the people that learn to create boundaries, loyalty boundaries at work, are the people that end up being okay. And they're the people that you still can work very, very hard, but you've got to have boundaries because there's going to come a day in your career when you get laid off and you're going to go, oh my gosh, what have I done? I gave 150% to this and I didn't create the boundaries that I needed. So, you should never be more loyal to a company than it can reasonably be to you in return. And that's what it's really about. Something's got to give. And that means you have the power. Don't wait for somebody else to set those boundaries.
I love that. Why did you put that first in your book?
Because at the time, COVID had hit and it
Oh,
was
that's true.
crazy. And I was talking to like dentists who had left their practice because they just couldn't do it anymore and were working at an Amazon warehouse. And people were saying, I just want, my brain's going to explode. I can't handle all the stuff that's coming in and I can't handle it anymore. And this was the great resignation. And
Mhm.
everybody was leaving and swapping jobs. And all of a sudden, we start to have things like quiet quitting come forward. And so people were just feeling a collective sense of it's just too much. And this old model of I'm going to go work, 10 hours a day and then come home and give whatever's left to my family, if anything, that model was dying. And I was just trying to give people a better sense for the control they have because we think the company's doing it to us, but you have more control than you think at work. And if you're working on the right things, not just everything, like a number comes in and so you just keep adding to your list, you can actually build a pretty darn good career.
I love that perspective of we do have choices.
We
We do
do.
have, even when I've counseled people that have lost their jobs in the past and so forth, I really look at them as and mention to them, you actually have so many choices right now. You can go in different directions. You can apply to different things. We always have choices, right? And I need to tell
Mm-hmm.
myself that all the time.
Well, when women do something often, they don't always. So nothing that I say is an always, but often women will say, I have to work longer. I have to work harder. I have to keep taking the work on that they are giving me, when in fact, that is never going to actually bring you happiness. And then what ends up happening is they get overwhelmed and go, I can't stand it anymore. And then they go to another company where they think it's going to be better and recreate the exact same dynamic in that company. And so that's why it becomes really, really important to understand and know how to pick the right work, how to communicate and not be taken advantage of, but still be a person that's an impact person that creates impact for a company. And there's enough time in the day to become an impact player if you do some of the other things right and you prioritize correctly. But oftentimes women think it's their duty to take on everything that's heaped
Yeah.
on. If somebody gets laid off, here, will you do the work while, and just absorb the work? And we say,
We're
okay,
used to doing that in the home, or
yeah,
just even if we don't have kids, we're used to just taking all the extra stuff.
yeah, we are. And I did it myself. I made the same mistake. I remember my husband texted me at about 9 o'clock at night. I was getting in a really bad habit of working really late. And he texted me, and I thought I'd be really cute and just send that little message back that's like, it says, I'll call you later or whatever. I'm busy right now. And I thought that's a little love tap to him to tell him I'm here. And he was so angry when
Oh
I got
no,
home. And he said,
I can
you
feel.
didn't have like 5 minutes to just call me and say I'm not coming home. And he goes, who else is in the office? I'm like, nobody. But I have to do it. I have to work late. I have to do this, or I'm going to get so behind. And he said, no, you don't. You are getting mixed up with what's relevant work to do and what people care about versus what you think is important. And he was right. And I've had to reset myself so many times, Susan, when I get in that rut of just doing everything that comes in and reset it to what's important.
Wow. Thank you. I'm still on that first question. It's so interesting. Let me shift to another question. So you have a chapter in the book called The Problem with Companies. And you make an argument that if you just understand the truth about companies, about HR departments and managers,
Mm-hmm.
that you can actually plan for your career better.
Yes.
So, and it feels like it's a lot about expectations in some ways. Talk about what
Yeah.
you mean there and what you taught in that chapter.
Well, a lot of times we think that companies are going to care about what we care about. And that doesn't work that way. So that's kind of the first lie of the workplace. You need to understand how a company thinks. A company cares about the bottom line, they care about efficiency and the bottom line. And so, if, for example, you're coming at a raise by I'm working really hard, and when so and so left, I absorbed the work and I haven't had a raise for 2 years, that's white noise to them. They don't care about that. The company cares about outcomes and results. And so Even one small shift when you understand that that's what a company cares about. So you come from your asks from what they get, not what you need, automatically changes the conversation in a very big way. And the same is true with HR and your manager. I talk over each of those groups and what they care about and how your conversations need to shift so that you can actually get what you want instead of making the mistake that everybody makes, which is I tell them what I want and hope that they care about the same thing.
That's such an important point. And I want to remind listeners that when we use the word company, we're actually talking about any workplace. Because even if you work for state government, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
there's a set budget, there's the same processes. What in a nonprofit, in at a university, don't you see that all?
Oh,
Like when
yeah.
we're talking about company, we're really talking about employer or workplace, right?
Yeah, there's workplace dynamics that, regardless of your industry, are going to be still in play, regardless of where you're at. Whether you're at an aviation company or a high-tech firm or you're a nurse, they all are the same. And so you need to understand what each of those audiences care about. Those are the I say, if an HR person, a manager, and a company walk into a bar, you start out with that. And it sounds like a joke, but you have to really understand each of those different audiences and what they're listening for and what they care about. And when you do, your asks change. Like HR cares about not discriminating, right? They care about lawsuits. And so if you're asking for a raise with them, you have to come at it from what they care about, which is, hey, my job is out of scope and I feel like the job might need to be rescoped. I've added a
Mhm.
lot of responsibility. Then they'll listen to you about
But just
pay.
using the right words,
Got to
even.
use the right language. Yeah.
I love that. Give us an example for the manager.
Managers are wired to meet certain objectives, right? Within the budget that they have. And so when you're talking to a manager, let's say about a raise, they care that it's going to pass muster with their manager so they
Okay.
don't look stupid. And if you go to them with a raise request and you have figured out a way in the budget that they can accommodate that, or you can speak about it in terms of if you do this, this efficiency will be gained or this return on
Yep.
the
Yep.
investment happens, then you have a greater chance of getting to it and getting a yes. So you always make the argument that your manager's manager would say yes to, because ultimately, if they're busting the budget for you, that's what has to happen is they have to pass muster with
Yeah.
the next level up.
And
So
that
you
really
talk
is,
in you talk in the term of numbers and
yeah.
I mean, because the language of business is numbers. It
Mm.
is not I like this or I don't like this or I work hard or don't work hard. It's efficiencies gained, revenue brought in, customers happier, steps taken out of the process.
So this is, it really, when I read that chapter, that expectation,
Mm-hmm.
you kind of shift. And men and women have different expectations, right?
Yes, they do.
This, what you just talked about reminds me of, the way I would approach, even when, I mean, I'm not looking for a job right now, but when I ask for money,
Mm-hmm.
I, I need to shift that. I don't like asking for money and I need money all the time
Mm-hmm.
to run the work that we're doing. But sometimes I do it from my perspective and I need to shift that to how does it benefit them, right? Is it the same
Yes,
principle?
absolutely you do. And you know what's interesting about women, I'm sure you've seen the research on this. It's not that women don't ask for raises, but they feel there's still some leftover feeling that they need permission to ask for the raise, but they actually do a pretty good job once they ask, but they feel like they need permission. And that is not true of the other sex. And in fact, having sit on HR side, it would make me so angry that women would never come and ask for raises and they were just happy with whatever we gave them, and the men would come to the coffers over and over and over again, and I'm like, does anybody know what's happening, and does anybody understand that out of cycle increases are always bigger increases, and if you have a good argument, you can get an out of cycle increase. But what often happens is women also love to follow the rules. We're like, oh, but it's year end. Maybe if I make a really good argument at year end and I just blow them away with my self-appraisal, they will see the light and they will say, this woman is a miracle worker. I'm going to give her a big increase. And it just isn't how it works. If I could just open the curtain and let you see how it works, you would be mortified and say, women, get it together.
For those of you that are thinking about this, asking for a raise, there really is an awesome training, AAUW. It's by AAUW. I think it's just aauw.org. Anyway, they have a 1 hour training. They have one for young women who are just coming out of college, and then they have one for everybody else. And it's just an hour online training, but it goes through some of the things you're talking about and gives you some real language. So we'll put that in the email, a link to that after this as well. So thank you for that. There are gender differences here. And with that topic of expectations, you just mentioned that. I mean, we expect that if we just perform well enough or do this or that, that things will come, when in reality, men don't expect that as much. They just know they have to go in. And it's socialization too. I don't
Mm-hmm.
like to shame women for that. It's the way we've been socialized. So we have to
Right.
relearn for the current modern workplace, right?
And well, I'd love to go to colleges and universities and teach people how to interview. And it's really interesting that still, even today, I can go do this. And as I model out interviewing, women are often reticent
Yeah.
to share the accomplishments, and they're very, very, very careful about it's we and it was a whole team, and men are still very, I did this and I did that, and I'm not
But we
saying
give
that.
men passes. Even as women, we give them passes to do that, and we don't give
Yeah,
each other passes sometimes.
it's just interesting to hear the differences in the way we talk about ourselves. And so learning, I think one of the things that's really important, if anybody is employed right now, start measuring what you're doing, because
Yeah.
you have to be able to tell the story about how was it when I got there and how is it now? What's the delta? What's the difference? What kind of outcomes did I get? And even if your manager doesn't have some kind of dashboard, create a dashboard on the things you're working on so you can show how you've changed things. And then that becomes the storyline for why you should be hired at another company. It really isn't the job description. That's the
Yeah.
People think that by having a really good way to show their job description on a resume, that's going to get them the job, and it isn't. It's your ability to say, here's the problems I can solve for you, and knowing the companies that you're interviewing for and being able to address and talk to the problems that you solve, which is why I really recommend when somebody's building their first resumes to say professional highlights right at the top and take the
Mhm.
best of the best, your highlight reel of what you've done, because talking about how you've solved problems is much more powerful than saying, trust me, I can do these skills that I put on the list.
Oh, such a good tip. I appreciate that. I'm going to do one more question, then I'm going to start taking questions from the audience. So be thinking of questions and start giving me those questions. Um, in another chapter, you bluntly say that there are many lies out there about performance.
Mm-hmm.
And one of those is about feedback. So I teach about the gift that really caught my eye.
Mm-hmm.
Teach about that a lot. What is the lie about feedback that's out there? And I talk to people about feedback being a gift, and just
Yeah.
why is feedback a gift? So both of those two.
Okay. Well, the lie is, if there's something wrong or a fatal flaw that I have, I'll know about it. And the truth is,
Oh,
you just don't. You don't know about it. And that is true from the CEO on down. Um, in being in HR, I can tell you that by the time feedback gets to you that's neutral to negative, it's 10 times worse than that because of people's aversion to conflict. I can remember sitting in the room when the CEO was fired. I was called in for an early morning meeting, and it was just um, the head of Blackstone came in and fired the CEO, and the CEO was escorted out of the building. And I was like, oh my gosh, he seemed truly surprised. And I thought, I don't think I'm that surprised, but he was. And then I was escorted in to meet the new CEO who proceeded to tell me, I'm going to fire half of the staff here. And should you be one of them? And proceeded to tell me that I had a reputation for not getting along with sales. I had no idea. The person that's supposed to be locked in the most to HR and to people's feelings and what's going on, I had no idea. And it's
Wow.
just, it drives the point home. You don't know feedback. And so you've got to get feedback on a regular basis. And I give them several ways to do it in the book because I think you have to ask very specific questions so you get honest answers. But your ability to get feedback during the year helps you make micro adjustments and that will help you be better. Don't wait till year end. Your manager's trying to do 20 reviews at once and they're just pumping stuff out, really, and they don't want the controversy. So, really, getting feedback during the year, once you get used to the discomfort of feedback and realize it actually helps you and doesn't hurt you, it can be such a gift.
And I'll tell you, I've looked into and studied feedback through the years, and it really is, first of all, women and men give men more feedback than women along the way.
Mm-hmm.
More critical feedback, more positive feedback, whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
of a nature that's deep.
Mm-hmm.
Not just you're doing great, but
Yeah.
actual wrestling feedback. So even we as women give men more feedback than we give other women. And there's reasons for that. But one thing that we know from the research is that getting good feedback, and good meaning either positive or negative or critical, just
Mm-hmm.
good feedback, is one of the top things for developing leadership.
It is.
It is. And so when we don't get it, and when we, um, just hate getting it, or even sometimes we can't help it, but we cry, and it makes, we have to, if we have tears, we need to still say, this is important. Thank you for this. And I need
Mm-hmm.
to keep having this. So it's uncomfortable, but we have to get comfortable with that. And give me your thoughts about this in terms of feedback. I have found with myself that when I create an environment where we can all give each other feedback and we take it from me personally out to, it's just there and we need to wrestle with it and fix it. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Mm-hmm.
Um, that you can create that culture in your team where it's not so awkward.
Well,
You
it's
see that?
true. More frequent feedback actually, we may be scared of it initially, but more frequent feedback feels like coaching as opposed to something punitive. But we are wired to think if somebody says, I want to give you some feedback, it's punitive. It
Yeah,
feels
true.
punitive. We avoid it like the plague. But getting it more often, once it's going to curl your toes the first time or two, but when you do it and seek feedback and realize it doesn't kill you, it becomes very, very useful. And I tell people, one of the best ways to get feedback is not to say, what do you think of me, but how do you think others perceive me? Because you're going to get a more honest answer than
Yeah.
if somebody has to say, oh, I think you're this. But if you're saying, oh, I think other people think this, you're going to get closer to the truth than you would in any other way.
Someone asked the question, and you just mentioned one. What questions do I ask to get good feedback? And first of all, make sure you're asking the right people, someone that you really trust, someone that has seen your performance and has seen you work. That's the person to ask. But what would you say? What are some good
I
questions?
I like people. I call it a feedback 4-pack. I think like 2 to 3 times a year, you should get a manager, somebody that you have a good working relationship with, somebody that's in another department that crosses paths with you and sees your work, and somebody that's neutral to negative. And I like to ask 3 questions. One is, how do you think others perceive me? Because I think that gets at the truth of a bunch of things. What is the one thing you think I'm working on? Like the biggest thing that I'm doing in my role, because it helps you understand how your work is perceived. And I'm telling you, I've had times in my career where I
Oh,
thought that I was known for something and I was not known for that thing that I thought was really important at all. So understanding what's getting across the finish line to other parties as to what you do, I think is really important. And I think another good question is, what's the one thing that if I, did changed or worked on would be the biggest, help me the most. And that's a good one. I also like asking people, what have you found that works? Because the more you get into a collaborative discussion with somebody,
Oh,
the more they open up about what's worked for them, you'll get some great gems. And people love to share what they've learned. And I found that that can build some really strong partnerships as well.
so with that question though, you probably ask, what have you found that works with whatever's a specific topic, right?
Yeah. Or sometimes it's like, what have you found that works in, building credibility in the organization? Or what is the thing that
Oh,
you
yeah,
found in this organization that has helped you the most, be seen as a positive resource or, a positive, someone that gets results? That would be what I would ask.
great. Um, someone asked in the chat, so if you showed up late, after I held this book up, this is Tessa's book from just a year and a half ago, The Unspoken Truth for Career Success. I had to turn it
I
around.
had to think about that.
So, so yeah, I don't know if you're looking at the questions in here, but there's a question that brings us back. I have a few more, but let's stop and hit a few from the audience.
Mhm.
Back to the salary question, we talked about
Uh-huh.
any recommendations if fair salary review has been requested and or a pay raise, but HR won't give an answer as they don't want to raise salary, even though the review would show that females were underpaid. Any response to that?
Yeah, that's hard. I think that even getting a no on asking for a salary increase is actually a step in the right direction because
Oh,
you're planting a seed. And trust me, if you ask your manager for a raise and went through the effort and the discomfort of that conversation for both ends, and you end up not getting one right then, I promise you, your manager is going to realize that they can't say no for forever.
yeah.
So, in that regard, it still plants a seed of urgency. The other thing to do is you've got to start keeping track of your outcomes and the areas and the ways that you've made a difference. So, for example, if I'm a recruiter, that's an HR world thing. If I just ask for the raise because I'm doing the work of somebody that left and I haven't got a raise for a while, that's not very compelling. But if I'm asking for a raise because I say, since I got in, I've been able to reduce the time to hire by so many days. And I've been able to cut the budget for external recruiters by 50,000. And when so and so left the company, I absorbed the work, which is another $50,000 in savings. All of a sudden, I can put all of that together into a pretty darn good proposal to
So you're
say,
saying you've got money.
I'm saying I've saved you this much money or made you this much money. And furthermore, if I continue to do those things, here's what it looks like after a year of savings. And then, doing your research on the outside to say, I'm getting calls about, I wouldn't use it as a threat, but as I look and I find what other people are making for this role, it feels like this one is perhaps scoped too low for how it's evolved. Could we rescope the position looking at what the responsibilities are today? And HR may still say no. It's very possible they can still say no. So
It's in the
then,
back of their minds, though.
yeah, you've already planted a seed. And there's a whole chapter in the book on leverage. There's all these ways you have leverage that you don't know. There's good leverage and bad leverage. You should study them and start to look at, do I have leverage? Have 3 out
Mhm.
of 4 people left the department? If so, you have huge
Yes,
leverage,
yes.
right? Because they have a scarcity of resources. If there's a big board push to get cut costs and you're like in accounting, if you left right then, it would be devastating. You have leverage. So you need to understand as well where you have leverage. And that's a really important piece to knowing how much you can ask for and when you could really push harder.
And as I'm thinking about the research on some related items, I think we as women, though, would think, well, I'm using or manipulating if I do that leverage. But it's business, Right?
Well, yeah. I mean,
They're not going to think that the opposite way.
I'm telling you, I've been on the other side of this, and it's business. People ask for raises all of the time. And while I'm not saying you need to go and ask for a raise every year and that that's a good idea. You need to be keeping track of the ways you're making a difference in an organization and not let an organization get away with giving you more responsibility, and just continuing to say, I'll take it on, I'll do the best I can, because here's what happens. Fast forward that 2 years, and all of a sudden you're doing the job of 2.5 people. You're going to
It
be
just
on a
builds.
performance plan.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many rent my brain clients come to me and they say, I'm on a performance plan because I was the good player and I just kept taking it on and now I can't manage it all and I'm in trouble.
Yeah.
So, this idea of boundaries and tracking what you're doing and how you're saving money
Love
becomes
this.
a really important part of your career.
I love this. And as most people know, probably that are listening in, we actually have the biggest pay gap in the nation between men and women. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Utah is us and Wyoming are like neck and neck. And we know that even if we separate career breaks and everything, and we know this from so much qualitative research that we pulled in, that even if you're apples to apples in everything, a lot of times women are just paid less. So we just
Yeah.
need to keep that in the back of the mind too, especially if there's lack of transparency. You might
But
be
yeah.
making $20,000 less than a man doing the same thing.
And I'm really proud that, like, I got to see all the pay information. That was so great about what being in HR and the head of HR. And I could see if there was a disparity with my pay and other executives, and I could fight for it because I knew all the information. I had it all. It was an open door. So for
And you
me,
probably had to do that.
I had to push all of the time. But I'll tell you, it helped me pay cash for a house when I was, 10 years into my career as a single mom. And I was like, that was it worth it? Yeah, it was worth it. And I don't think anybody would ever go back and say Tessa was really hard to work with. I just simply advocated for myself. And that became an important part of my career, was always thinking to the future, like how am I making a difference? Am I tracking it? How do I know I'm making a difference? Am I sharing it or socializing it with my manager so that I can end up on top, when all is said and done.
Thank you so much. I've worked in a number of questions, but I can't, I'm looking at our time and we only have about 10 minutes left, and I cannot let us slide by without asking you. You had a whole chapter, or you brought it up many times in the book about, and you used the word power.
Mm-hmm.
So power is often a rough word for women. We're
Mm-hmm.
socialized not to want power.
Yeah.
For women specifically, what are lies we hear about power, and why is power really important?
Well, this is really relevant for men as well as women, but the lie we believe in the workplace is that if I have the right title or the right budget, then I have power. And what I try and teach people is no, there's so many ways for you to have power and what a good thing it is. And if you shift power with knowledge, for example, if you're studying your quarterly reports in the company, if it's a public company, or if you're studying your industry, knowledge becomes a very powerful tool for you to use to, create, here's the thing, here's the direction we need to go, company, here's the next steps we need to take, this is what's happening. And so knowledge would be one thing that I say everybody has access to it and you shouldn't be afraid of it.
And
Power is
power
really
sometimes
about,
feels selfish,
yeah,
but it's
but it
not.
isn't. I mean, I
Right.
had I had a CEO come to me once and he said, I had no idea that you were working on this project over here. And I'm like, oh, I just wanted to keep you out of the fray. I didn't want to, bother you with it. And he said, do you understand that I can help you get ahead? If I knew you had that skill set, I would have put you in other things and had you do other things. And I felt like
Mhm.
it was self serving, that it was like selfish self promotion to tell him that what I was doing, because what worked for me early in my career, which was to just be quiet and get stuff done. I worked really early in my career and I got a lot of promotions out of it. It doesn't hold true as you get to a stage 3 and a 4 and a 5 of your career. You really have to be able to let people know what you're working on, not because it's self promotion, but because it allows you to be seen as a collaborator across an organization and other people to help you.
And to
You have to be helped.
contribute. I mean,
Yes.
we know from all the Gallups, I'm a strength coach, I've been doing that for, that when you're in your space where you really have your gifts and your talents, you find more joy.
Yes,
You
absolutely.
you want people to, you want to be in a place where you can utilize, your head, heart, and hands in all kinds
Mhm.
of great ways. So I love that. Any, you looked like maybe you had one
No,
more
no.
piece. Oh, okay. So we need to get comfortable with using the word power. Power can be knowledge, it can be influence, but we want to influence. I mean, we influence all the time. If we have teenagers or toddlers in our home, we're trying to influence. That's what we're trying to
That's
do,
right.
to contribute.
You have a voice, and I learned this really late in the game. Here's the deal. You're going to come across things that are uncomfortable to you or to others. And if you speak up, it's going to be uncomfortable. So we often don't do it. But if you don't speak up, it is also uncomfortable. And you are going to learn that it is, I would rather live with the discomfort of speaking up and making it better than I would with the discomfort of saying nothing and having nothing change. And that was a really hard lesson for me to learn, that my
This is
voice
so
is
important.
important.
This is so important. And to be, if you have discomfort either way, you might as well be making more money.
You might as be making more money or making a difference. I didn't realize like I could have a voice in the whole direction of the company if I spoke up. Like I could say, no, this program needs to be implemented to help this, or no, we're not going to do layoffs that way. And finally, I was like, oh, wow, I have a voice and I need to use it. And it's incredibly important.
I love that. There's kind of a long question for us in the chat, but I really want to bring up pieces of it because it is so true for living in Utah right now, and for Tessa, for our kids too. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it is, our costs are goofed up.
Yeah.
Even you're a young professional, and this person was saying, I don't see how I'm ever going to be able to start a family or buy a home. Even, it takes two incomes, all this stuff happening, and then thinking already, and I'm finding my students and others are thinking about house, but then childcare on top of it.
Oh,
So this
it's
whole,
crazy.
that's another reason for asking for raises and making sure we do that. But on the other hand, thinking about having family, but needing to work so we can have a house or a place, it's that question that is so challenging about balancing. And that's kind of where you started in some ways with our conversation today.
Mm-hmm.
Any more thoughts about that? Is it possible? Is balancing possible and still making money and being able to buy a house and these things? Is it possible for these young folks today?
Maybe some people can pull it off. I was never able to, but I felt a lot better when I realized that it's really hard to come. I mean, if you think everything is in balance and everything's
Yeah.
perfect, then let me meet you, because it was a constant challenge for me of balancing and rebalancing and shifting and fixing and trying to get it right. It is, I don't want to tell anybody that it's easy. I raised 3 kids for 10 years as a single parent, and it was hella hard. And and I don't know that there are really, really easy answers, but I do know this, like, you're not screwing up your kids. And I want people to know that. My daughter went to college. I thought, I've dealt with the guilt of being a full time career woman for a long time. And my daughter wrote an article about how my mom was the best mom in the world in college. And she said, my mom, instead of baking cookies after school, taught me how to run an Excel spreadsheet or how to invest in the stock market. My mom taught me, when I went to college, my mom, I knew how to do laundry and I knew how to do all of these things because she wasn't around. She was working, but it was a beautiful tribute. And it helped me understand, I was so afraid of screwing up my kids, but there's compensatory, wonderful things that your children will learn by seeing you happy doing something that you're getting good at, and developing skills. And they will learn a lot from just watching you being a curious learner. and
Mm.
you trying to balance things. You're not going to screw up your kids so bad that, it's you're unredeemed or anything.
And I love just you love your kids. That's the most important thing. You love them and do what you can, um, and it has to work out. It just works out, right?
Well, it doesn't sometimes. That's the thing.
Yeah,
It
that's
doesn't
true.
sometimes, but it's okay. Like I had to pick what are the couple of things I want my kids to know. And I wanted them to know they were loved. And I
Yeah,
wanted them to know the value of when you pick up one end of the stick, you pick up the other, like consequences to actions. And I wanted them to learn to work hard. So you have
yeah,
to get really selective when you're balancing 100 different things. That's the reality of it. But it's still, it doesn't mean that it's bad
yeah.
that you're not getting it perfect.
I love that. I've got so many more questions coming in, and from my list, but we're out of time and I need just 1 minute at the end to announce a couple things. But what have we not talked about that really is something that with this audience of mostly women that
Hmm.
you think would be good to leave us all with?
Do you care if I just plug for a second something we
Oh,
just rolled out? It was for this type of audience. We
great.
just rolled out Career RX, and this is a private career platform where I mentor people live twice a week, and we bring in thought leaders and authors from all over,
Oh,
and I
fun.
drop deep dive training. So instead of 30-second TikToks, you get like deep dive training every week. This is the perfect audience to know that that exists because if you like the advice I give in a book, this is like a personal coach for you in your
Awesome.
career. And I just wanted to let people know it exists. You can look at it by just going to any of my social profiles, and there's a link in the profile and you'll find it there. But I just wanted people to know that's out there because it would help so many people.
Thank you so much. And again, when we send the link to the video so that you can share with other people and rewatch pieces if you would like, we'll put the link to this book. It's just really solid. I've researched in this space for women for so many years, and it does feel like it's research based and just some great stories. We sure appreciate you. Thank you so
Oh,
much for
thank
joining
you.
today. And I would also like to thank our sponsors again, the John M. Huntsman School of Business and USU Extension for making this event possible. So I appreciate everybody joining today. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And thanks again to Tessa for joining.
Thank you, everybody.